Now I want to introduce you to the American legal system. There are four sources of American law, and they are the Constitution, statutes, regulations, and common law. It's important to understand the most important source is the U.S. Constitution. It is viewed as a manifestation of the people's will. That's why it's number one. Statutes are a manifestation of legislative power. So for Congress, and when I say Congress, I mean the House and the Senate, they manifest their authority through the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, and you'll see Article 1, Section 8 is where the authority of Congress is enumerated. That's why they have this concept of enumerated powers, like the authority to regulate interstate commerce. So statutes have to be constitutional, right? Regulations are a manifestation of executive power. Those are intended to implement the statutes because the Congress doesn't have time to get into the minutia of particular implementation of the statutes, so they leave it to the executive and the executive agencies. For example, Department of Ecology, on the federal level you have Department of Labor, things like that. Then you have this concept called common law. Now, common law are essentially judicial decisions that have accumulated over time and created a body of law called common law. Don't be confused about that term. A lot of people think common law is for the common people. No, common law is judicial decisions that have accumulated over time and created a body of law that we are going to talk about, like contracts and torts. So that's the foundation of a lot of what we're going to talk about. Now, common law is a manifestation of judicial power, but that can be altered by statutes. Statutes can alter common law. So let's say a court makes a decision, Congress is not happy with it, Congress can change that, so long as the statute that Congress passes is constitutional. And this is where we get the checks and balances. This is where they come into play because ultimately the courts are the guardians of the Constitution. So the courts will determine whether or not a statute is constitutional or any other executive action, whether it's an executive order, a statute, or whatever, or regulation. The courts have what's called judicial review. Judicial review is a very powerful trump card that the courts have to check statutes, check the other branches of government, legislative and executive branches. So keep that in mind. That's the balance of the checks and balances that we have in our democracy. I mentioned this concept of enumerated powers. Look in your book, in the appendix, or look it up on Google or Bing. Enumerated powers, you just have to understand that these are the powers that the U.S. Constitution lists that Congress has authority over, like immigration, naturalization. That's Congress's authority. States cannot get involved with that. States have tried to do that, and the courts, again, exercising judicial review, said you don't have any authority to do that. That's left to Congress. Same thing with, declaring war, they're imposing taxes, things like that. Now, with all that said, I mentioned that things that are not enumerated or aren't exclusively within the purview of Congress, the states can enact statutes. And obviously every state has a constitution, and states have statutes, states have regulations. I think the best way to look at constitutions, whether it's federal or state, is to realize that they are like business plans. They set up the government into three branches. They delineate the authority of those branches, and they also have something similar to a Bill of Rights. When I say Bill of Rights, we're talking about the first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution. And these require, if you read those, which you will, you'll see that it says Congress shall make no law, for example, impinging on freedom of religion, speech, right to assembly, etc. That's the First Amendment. Why is this important to businesses? Businesses, if you're a corporation in particular, you're considered a person under the law. So you have, as a corporate entity, you have rights just like a natural person would under the Constitution. And this has been highly criticized recently, but that's a fact. if something is not covered by the U.S. Constitution or exclusively limited to the federal government, it's left to the states and the people. This is via the 10th Amendment. And the states have a lot of authority under what's called police power to regulate for public peace, health, and safety. So most businesses, that's what you're going to be concerned about is state and local regulations. I should make note that when we talk about constitutional rights, it's important to use the correct terminology. Constitutional rights refers to those rights in the Bill of Rights. So we're talking about freedom of speech, freedom from unreasonable searches and seizures, that's the Fourth Amendment. Those, again, apply if there is a state actor. And you'll see this term I use over here, state action. State action means that there's got to be a state actor. It could be the police, it could be somebody working for the police, who do something that violates your these constitutional rights. Same thing on the state level. States have what are called declarations of rights, which actually gives you more rights than what the federal Bill of Rights enumerates. And the Bill of Rights are simply a listing. I think it's important to understand. The Bill of Rights is simply a listing of natural rights you have, and it's not meant to be exclusive. So there are a lot of things that are not listed there. And it doesn't mean you don't have those. And in fact, the Ninth Amendment talks about, the Ninth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution says essentially that the fact the first 8 rights amendments are not meant to be exclusive. So, so states give you more rights, and that's important to understand as far as businesses are concerned, because if you have a state actor, if the police come into your restaurant or something and they do something, you may have rights, you would certainly have rights under the Fourth Amendment and perhaps even more rights under the state constitution. Ultimately, as I indicated, the U.S. Constitution is number one. Every state constitution recognizes that the U.S. Constitution is supreme over any conflicting state laws. Now, with that said, state statutes can give you, just like the State Declaration of Rights, gives you more rights or recognizes more rights. State statutes can create more rights than you have under the federal statutes. For example, the minimum wage on the federal level is lower than what it is in the state. So there are layers of laws you need to be concerned about as businesses, and it can indeed get complicated, but hopefully these introductory materials will help you, and plus the resources I list for you on your course page. A couple of basic things about classifications of law that you just need to know. Civil versus criminal, and here's how it works and why it's important. In the civil world, the correct terminology is I'm suing you. I'm suing you, and I'm looking to find you liable for money, damages, or what are called equitable remedies. And you'll see this as discussed in your book. Equitable remedies include such things as injunctions, specific performance. They're equitable. When you see the word equitable, think of fairness. This is where you got harmed, you were harmed by somebody, and it's not a criminal case. You're suing somebody, you're looking for monetary damages, and you're looking to find the person liable. I am suing you, right? Normally it's between private parties, but certainly the government can be involved in a civil suit. The criminal case, I don't spend a lot of time on this because businesses, generally that's not a major focus. With that said, however, businesses can be criminally prosecuted, and when that happens, so a corporation can be prosecuted, although who's going to jail is going to be the officers or directors are going to be ending up facing criminal penalties. So in a criminal world, we talk about the government is prosecuting you. So it could be the federal government, state government, local government. They are prosecuting you. And the issue is whether or not you are guilty. I think that's important to understand because it's not innocence. Innocence is not really the issue in a criminal case. Criminal case, Ultimately, the question is, can the government prove each element of the crime as defined by statute beyond a reasonable doubt, right? And that's the burden in a criminal case, beyond a reasonable doubt. Very high burden. In a civil case, the burden is normally preponderance of the evidence. Just think of the scales of justice, and if you can prove that the other side is liable by at least 51%, you win your case. Criminal, the standard is beyond a reasonable doubt, a far higher standard. And you'll see that if you look at the Bill of Rights, our federal Constitution and our state Constitution give a tremendous amount of protection to people accused of crime. And we'll talk about that in a little while. Another classification we talk about is public versus private law. Very simply, public law, or what's referred to as positive law, this is law that is created by the government that can include Constitution, statutes, regulations, things like that. So those are public laws that we will be talking about. Private law, think about contracts between the private parties. And a lot of this class will focus on the nuances of contract law. So